let's start. May I kindly ask you to please close the door, just that. No, not to you, to the guy. I know, there's other people coming, sorry. But anyway, let's start. Good morning. Welcome to parallel session 16. Now, the title of this session is The Role of Multilingualism in and for the Research Ecosystems. It's a very vague, at least the second part. It's rather vague and broad, but I think that today we will see why the issue of multilingualism is so rich and also controversial, let's say it, that we struggle to find and kind of overarching title. Why multilingualism? Why discussing about multilingualism? Well, for some, the issue of multilingualism multilingualism within research is not a problem at all, it's a false problem. There's a common language, in some fields there's a dominant language, it works, so that's it. Why was the issue? For others is indeed an issue, a problem. Scientifically, I mean within the process, the work as researchers, and socially, meaning the position of researchers and research within society. It connects with research assessment. That probably is the most obvious connection between multilingualism and how researchers from different fields and in different contexts, they publish in other languages that are not necessarily English, let's say it, or in other contexts can be other languages, how they can be, their quality, their research can be assessed fairly if there is a point of view of a dominant language that should be the one used, for example. But it also connects with science communication. Yesterday we had 2 intense sessions on science communication, and the day before a training workshop, an 8-hour training workshop on science communication. Because let's even assume for a moment that having a common language, one language that's already there, and let's apologize for, I'm doing it on purpose, I'm using English on purpose, okay, as the dominant language. It's a bit provocative. Let's assume that that's okay, it works, but then we need to speak with the people, with society. We have this kind of obligation, a duty to public outreach. And even if it's not a duty, it's something that's at the very least, it's not a moral duty as researchers, the very least something that is required by us more and more in projects, and we are evaluated, our project, our proposals are evaluated like this. And communication means speaking with our neighbors, speaking with our local communities. It's a very effective way to involve them in science and explain to them. So it has to do with science communication, and then obviously there is a general issue. I'm not sure how much we will be able to discuss it today. The general issue of language rights, human rights, cultural identity of researchers, and so on. So let me start first by thanking the speakers, and you as well, of course, for being here. The speakers are Janne Polonen, Sebastian Dale, and online we have Emanuele Cardano. We'll introduce them one by one in due time. Let's start with Janne. So Janne is the Secretary General of the Publication Forum of the Finnish Federation of Learned Societies. He participates in several European projects on research assessment of, let me read this, Diamond Open Access Publishing Standards, and he's a member of IOSC, the task force of IOSC on research careers, recognition and credit, even more relevant to the topic of the day, of this session, he is one of the initiators of the Helsinki Initiative for Multilingualism in Scholarly Publications. The floor is yours. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to start by thanking Marie Curie Alumni Association for inviting me to participate in this session on multilingualism and in this beautiful city of Cordoba. In this presentation, I will provide an overview of multilingual communication of research-based knowledge, but I will also tell you about the Helsinki Initiative in some detail. So let's start with multilingualism. Multilingualism refers to the use of many languages by individuals or by communities. And of course, research communities are one of the good examples of multilingual communities, even if in international contexts we prefer to use English, like we do now. In scholarly and science communication specifically, we can look at multilingualism from several perspectives. We can ask if a specific document is available and accessible in several languages. In how many languages do researchers communicate their results? What is the language variety of publishers offering to authors in journals and books? We can look at field-specific needs and differences in language use for communication. And of course, we can also look at organizations and countries. What is the language diversity of the entire scholarly output? And why is this important? Well, firstly, multilingualism and language diversity are a matter of rights. So the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 27, states that everyone has the right to enjoy the arts and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. And in the very same vein, also the Charter for Fundamental Rights of the EU places an obligation on the Union to respect linguistic diversity and also prohibits discrimination on grounds of language. And this is also important from the point of view of assessment. Now, make no mistake, of course, international excellence, collaboration, mobility, communication, all these are very important science policy goals, and of course the use of English as a common language greatly facilitates the attainment of these goals. But if research is communicated exclusively in English, then academia risks really meeting all its missions and responsibilities towards society. And we have indeed more and more policy work that recognizes the importance of multilingualism. So we have responsible research and innovation policy as well as open science policy that call for broad access to scientific knowledge, interaction between science and society, and promotion of citizen science. And none of this is possible if research is communicated only in one language. And this is also recognized by UNESCO in the recent recommendation on open science. So UNESCO makes multilingualism the very part of the definition of open science. So open science makes multilingual scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable for everyone. And UNESCO also urges the member states to consider encouraging multilingualism in practice of science, in scientific publications, and in academic communications. And the same also European Council conclusions on research assessment and implementation of open science published last year also encourage the use of multilingualism for the wider communication of European research results. I'm happy to notice also that the Council welcomes initiatives to promote multilingualism like the Helsinki Initiative. The European University Association states in support of the Helsinki Initiative that balanced multilingualism is particularly relevant for Europe as its research is characterized by geographic, cultural, and linguistic diversity, and the common principle of excellence. And we know that EU has 24 official languages, and even more languages are actually written and spoken across Europe. And we know that almost half of the Europeans 10 years ago were not able to speak any foreign language well enough to hold a conversation, and only 38% were able to do so in English. So English alone is not sufficient. And on the map you can see the current situation, the share of adult population unable to speak any foreign language. Now let's then look quickly at the practice of multilingualism, how it is done in SSH and STEM fields. So in the social sciences and humanities, multilingualism has been and still remains an international pattern of publishing. So, and the reason for this is that in the social sciences and humanities, the important part of research is really contextualized. It focuses on aspects of specific society, culture, history, language, and this creates a specific need for original research to be published in the language that is actually written and spoken by the citizens who are concerned and affected by the research. And we have been able to carry out comparative studies of several European countries that show that there are also very wide differences between countries in Europe in the uptake of English language publishing versus national languages. So they range, for instance, from 80% in Flanders to only 17% in Poland published in English. We have another study comparing 7 European countries showing that more than half of the SSH researchers who numbered 25,000 in the study published peer-reviewed journal articles in more than one language. So it is really a common ongoing practice to publish in many languages in the social sciences and humanities. But then we think that multilingualism is only relevant for SSH, but that is not true actually. So I can share you here some new results from a comparative study with Emanuel Kulczycki on multilingual publishing across fields of science, including STEM, comparing Finland and Poland. So when we look at the left side, we have the results from Finland on peer-reviewed output of universities, and we indeed see that in natural sciences, engineering, medical sciences, and agriculture, almost the entire output is in English. But then when we look at the situation in Poland, we can see that even in the STEM fields, almost half of the research is published in Polish. So it doesn't hold true that English is the dominant language all across the world. So we can see already this diversity in Europe, and we can see and would see even stronger diversity across the world if we had data to look. And one important aspect is also the science communication practices, because there we can see a lot of similarities between STEM fields and the social sciences and humanities. So the Finnish publication data we used in these analyses includes publications also to professional and general audiences. And we can see that in publications to professional audiences, also the STEM fields predominantly use Finnish as a communication language. And in communications to general audiences, actually all fields from STEM to SSH publish almost only in the national languages. So in science communication, the differences between fields disappear. Now, especially in the STEM fields, it is often emphasized that we do international research that has global impact. And indeed, at its broadest, the impact of research can be global, but we often forget that the impact to take place, it always is realized locally in societies where different languages are written and spoken. And the COVID-19 pandemic really saw this widespread need for multilingual communication between researchers, decision makers, professionals, and citizens, in addition to the huge production of research published in English. So to cope with grand challenges and to meet sustainable development goals globally, we really need both globalized and localized research communicated in various languages and formats. And this brings me finally to the Helsinki Initiative. So the Helsinki Initiative was launched in 2019 to foster an environment that values multilingual scholarly communication, science communication, and open access to scholarly publications in all languages. And the main goal of the Helsinki Initiative is to ensure the availability of high-quality research information published in all languages that are needed across the world for effective communication of research knowledge within and beyond academia. And we have already 1,000 signatories from over 70 countries that agree that multilingualism is really an international, not just a local concern. And these are the main recommendations of the Helsinki Initiative. I simply repeat the main points. So firstly, to support multilingual dissemination of research results within and beyond academia for the full benefit of society. And is that we really require journals and book publishers to be able to publish in the different languages, and therefore we need to protect this very fragile infrastructure for publishing, especially in its transition to open access. And third point is very important and has been raised many times. We need to promote language diversity and in research assessment, evaluation, and funding systems, not only in metrics, also in expert assessment. Quick point about the publishers. So we really need national publishers of journals and books to maintain high standards of peer review and research integrity in national language publishing on topics that are relevant for the society and develop the scientific terminology. And this is more common, especially in the time and open access publishing model. So this is something we really need to focus on. When it comes to research assessment, it is a pity that policymakers, evaluators, funders, and even many researchers still think that research of any value to science and society is published in international English language journals, and this is not true. Excellence is still typically identified as articles published in journals indexed in Web of Science and Scopus, and on the right side you can see in the table showing how small share of the peer-reviewed research in some fields, especially social sciences and humanities, is included in these databases. So really, intended or unintended language priorities in assessment may compromise equal opportunities for individual researchers and institutions, endanger, because of lacking incentives, locally relevant research and knowledge transfer beyond academia, and it could also result in systematic undervaluation of SSH research compared to STEM fields in assessment and funding. This is luckily something that is recently addressed in the Agreement on Reforming Research Assessment, QARA, of which we have also heard many times during yesterday and maybe also today. So the first core commitment actually says that we need to recognize valuable contributions that researchers make to science and for the benefit of society, including diverse outputs beyond journal publications and irrespective of the language in which they are communicated. So, finally, some key takeaways. In science policy, we need to recognize the value of multilingualism and balance international excellence with local relevance of research. We need to rethink our priorities. Second point, we prioritize scholar-led, profit, time and open access publishers of journals and books, and especially those published in the national language, because they are in the very weakest and most fragile position in the entire landscape of journals and book publishers. And thirdly, in research assessment reform, we need to recognize and reward research published in all languages and address language biases in metrics and expert-based assessment. And here you can find the links to where you can read and sign as an individual or as an organization. You can also convince your organization to sign Helsinki Initiative, and you can find information and contact us by email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you. I mean, really, the timer says it's 0 now, so perfect. It's amazing, amazing. Thank you very much for this. Let's leave Q&A, the questions towards the end. Let me now introduce the next speaker, Sebastian, and I'll introduce it with this little inside story. Janne mentioned, referred to the EU recommendations on research assessment and open science. So at one point, when after the EU published, the Commission published that document, some organizations, the MCAA, Eurodoc, the Young Academies, and others, now I don't remember the whole list, decided to write and then publish a statement about that considerations published by and the title of the document, of the EU document, is Consideration of Research Assessment and Open Science, but the document has 3 parts. One is research assessment, one is open science, and the third part is multilingualism. Okay, so those are the 3 topics. And when we were drafting this document, our point of view, pros and cons, praising the document, but also highlighting some negative aspects on the first 2 parts was rather smooth. A discussion started about is multilingual. If we had to add a section commenting a comment on the multilingualism part of that document, and no, it's not a problem at all. It's a non-problem. It's a false problem. So that discussion to the point that in the final statement, joint statement by all the associations, there is not a single line on the multilingualist part. So it was so controversial that there was no agreement, okay, among the... And one of those who was in that discussion, took part in that discussion, pushing for multilingualism was Sebastian. Sebastian Dale is a professor of wood science and technology at the University of Ljubljana, where he directs the Plasma Center. But in this context, is here as the vice president of Eurodoc, the European Council of Doctoral Candidates and Young Researchers. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, yeah. And with the background story, you also already went ahead for some parts that I was going to raise in the talk. So, yeah, thanks for this. And as you can see on the first slide, it's also the reason why we have the question mark in the title, because it's been such a controversial debate. Some seeing this as an obstacle that we should avoid. Some others seeing this rather like a whole open door to the whole new world. So there's really all sorts of aspects that came up. And so in the talk today, what I'm gonna present is a couple of those larger points that we had, and highlight both sides, the positive, the negative that were mentioned, and underline this with my personal example. Then, because after all, if we're talking about languages are between people. It's something that connects us with each other. So I think that the personal viewpoint, in addition to all the framework, the research, and everything that we heard in Janne's nice talk, I think this personal level is also something we should not forget about, and so that's what my talk is going to focus about. And it seems kind of obvious for us. I mean, we have in the EU 24 official languages alone. There's more than 200 recognized languages in Europe alone. The Marie Curie alumni has 35 different chapters with their languages. So to all of us, it should be obvious that language is something that concerns us, right? And heading right into the discussions that we mentioned. So there were a common group of larger points where really the criticism happened. So these were, as is highlighted here, negative points being like, we need a common language, which I think we can all agree, we need some mutual language that we can understand each other. There were also points saying that multilingualism then can lead to segregation if you're not having the common language. It's something maybe more suited for the general public, so rather maybe not for the scientists to engage in, and the others, as you can read them out yourselves. So I think, yeah, with that I'll move ahead to the next slide, and we're gonna take a look into all these points in a little bit more detail during the talk. As Gian-Maria already mentioned, the starting point for us for these really intense discussions, intense exchanges to see what's our position there, started with these council conclusions. And if you're interested in the statement that came out, you have the QR code, so have an easy access to also that. But we'll move ahead. The lingua franca, the common language, that's something that's already mentioned in the council conclusions, saying, yes, this is a value, yes, we need to keep this up, we need to have a common understanding, we need to be able to take part in the global scientific debate. It's lots of different communities that need to be able to communicate with each other, and that's an important issue and an important part of this. So yeah, we need the common language to include everyone. And also the EU Council conclusions make it quite clear this common language for us is English. Of course it is. But also, that's of course a pretty Eurocentralistic standpoint, because there's much more parts of the world. It's not just us, it's not just the English-speaking part of the world. We saw that even in Europe there's huge proportions of the societies who don't speak English. But if you look further ahead, there's whole parts of the world for whom the common language is a different one. This might be Spanish, this might be Russian, this might be Chinese. There's some others as well. So speaking of English being the de facto global lingua franca, that's not true. And this also is something that's not just a general statement and that's maybe worthwhile for the public to consider, but it's something that affects our research, in fact. So just to give a very, again, personal example, yesterday we presented one ongoing EU project about open science, about research assessment. And in this project, we recently finished a landscaping analysis looking in the existing research, and a couple of them were available only in Russian. So this already sort of defies the point that English really is, in all parts of the world, the common language. It really is not, and we are losing out if we pretend it would be. The other point then is with the segregation, to say, well, multilingualism, if everybody publishes in their language, is communicating in their language, there is a risk that this leads to fragmentation, that people are then segregating, that communities, in fact, are not exchanging anymore. And on a long shot, in a long trajectory from there, this might even provide a breeding ground for nationalism, so the critic point that was raised. Now, on the one hand side, of course, with this segregation, the fragmentation, we saw on the slide before, that's at least if we look on the global perspective, that already is the case. So it's something that we should try to overcome. But not going into too much details again with that. It's also something that even in our world here in Europe, in our English-speaking world, still different languages bring their values in. So in a citation of a colleague who was participating in these discussions that we had, he put it, the language is more than just a means to communicate. It's also a way of reading the world. And there's different things that you can express in languages to a different degree and with different ease of communicating those ideas. I'm not going to try to relay the social science concepts that are particularly behind this, that really are quite different in different languages. But I'm going to bring a more commonly understandable maybe example. So having a German background, I think many people know about these long and kind of intricate German words, and one that has come up in a couple of those like YouTube videos or in other contexts is Kummerspeck. So this is a typical word. The German-speaking audience, I see, is smiling. Understand what it's about. You see the explanation. So it's you're going to a phase of grief, and overall this leads to you gaining some weight because of the habits that you take on. There's no single term, no single concept to actually express this in English. And I mean, this is from an everyday example, but the same holds true for scientific contexts in many fields. So segregation already is a fact, but also not just that we need to overcome it. The local languages do have more of an impact than just communicating this to journalists, but there's an added value to that. And this is also true in the communication to the professional communities, to scientific communities even. It's much easier to engage in the native language. Even if they, in theory, are speaking English, the professional communities don't all read up in all the English resources, and also the scientific ones are much easier really to be engaged. It's a matter also of building more trust. It's a matter of building, strengthening the civic society. So sure, journalists are supposed to communicate rather with the local audiences as well, and then in the native language. But it's far beyond that. And yet also for the journalists, if you're thinking to not just divert your time too much from your research activities to communicate this all to public audiences, even to be taken up by journalists, it does help if you put out some of your research also in the local language. So even just to make it accessible to many of the science journalists. And even one step beyond that, there is places in Europe where multilingualism is not just an option, it's mandatory by regulations. So it's a fact already that at least some of us are living every day. And it's something that adds value. So to come back to the point, it's not just for the journalists. This is one personal example. A couple of years ago, we had a small project, nice results, published some papers out of this. And at the end of the project, we made available a short report in English, in German, because this been in Germany by the time. And the German report then exactly was picked up by a journalist who otherwise wouldn't have recognized this, wouldn't have found this, was published in a newspaper that then was recognized by one company owner of a company some 300 kilometers, a little further away. He reached out to us, and in the end, actually we started a joint project, and some of those results of the project that we had conducted went into this company. A colleague of mine had then the chance to work with us for 2 years in this funded project, so it's something that already brings back benefits for us. It's not just, we have an obligation, we benefit from it. And to make the last point of the bullet point list, the mandatory part, that's also something that's to some degree holding true for me after moving to Slovenia. In Slovenia, they have, in fact, regulations to also preserve their professional language, and so I'm obliged, well, for me some exceptions apply, but in Slovenia there's this general obligation to publish also in Slovene. This can be bilateral, but you also need to have some things published in Slovene to advance your career, otherwise you're at some point dropping out of the system. Is this good or bad? I see it rather in a positive way, particularly also since exemptions are in place to make the system still conducive for international mobility, for international researchers. But yet it keeps up also with local communities, it keeps up with many benefits also in the local language. And so I did enjoy this, I did also do this, and this leads over to the next point saying, well, maybe this is also too expensive to do, there's so much effort and we gain so little, which in my experience, actually, that's not true. So there's already so many options available where you can publish in several languages. Remember, multilingualism doesn't say you need to publish just in the one or just in the other. But there's a lot of different kinds of options to make this possible. Here's one recent example out of my publications just to show you this is there, particularly as we heard before in the context of this Diamond Open Access journal landscape. Many of those offer these kind of possibilities. And also with the efforts, for a first approach, we have a lot of interesting tools that are getting better and better by the day. Speaking of, course, also of artificial intelligence technologies. So there's things that ease the way, and even without those tools, many of those open access journals that provide multilingualism or that provide bilingual publications actually offer you a free language service as well. So the efforts and the expenses for you really don't need to be the barriers. And so There's a couple of further points that were discussed. There might be integrity issues that are related to this. How is it about double publications, taking double credit for the same kind of results? Some issues were raised. Might this also contradict scientific standards? Since we need to make sure that the quality assurance, the peer review, and all the things work out properly fine. Another issue might be with the choice of the languages you're publishing in, that these then again lead to some geopolitical implications, that you're quite biased in the languages maybe that you're choosing to publish in. So, of course, these are criticisms that need to be taken seriously. So they have their grounds. But then also, it's somehow by proxy, it's not really just a matter of multilingualism. The quality assurance, the integrity to not double publish results, and also how do we include different parts of the world and make sure that we are inclusive in this kind of way. These are larger issues that are not so much just tied to in how many languages I'm publishing. And so to solve them, there's a lot of approaches also already there to really go about that. If you're doing research, if you're doing your publications as open as possible, if you make this transparent, if you make it accountable, then a lot of these points actually can already be tackled and don't need to be a problem. They don't need to be an issue. And of course, an important part then again also in this is the training, so we know what's there and how we can do this. And with this, I'm finishing just a few seconds over time, I see, with a positive message that I want to put out, and that's we are diverse. The world is diverse, the whole communities are, so let's embrace this. It's an asset, it's something positive, it's something where we can all benefit from, so let's really embrace it and take that up, also in the way how we communicate, how we publish. Thank you. Oh, I still had 2 minutes. So,
2 minutes ahead of time. Thanks so much. That's great. Thank you, Sebastian. Let's move on to the next, our final speaker, and then we can open the floor to our discussion. So the next speaker is Emmanuel Gardan. Emmanuel is the director of the Coimbra Group of Universities. She has also experience, a very wide experience, as former head of the Higher Education and Research Unit at the Union of the Mediterranean, and she worked at the Erasmus Plus French National Agency, where she was the national contact point for Erasmus Mundus. Now, thank you very much, Emmanuel, for accepting our invitation. Let me just mention this as a further introduction to try to show the kind of design behind the choice of the invitation of different speakers. Last year, first of all, the Coimbra Group is a very influential, important voice in the field, and last year their annual conference was focused on academic freedom, which has many values, but one of the aspects within academic freedom has also to do with languages. So they have been, have an attention to the topic also through their work as one of the founding members of COARSA. And so thank you very much, Emmanuel, for this. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much to you, Gian Maria, for this kind introduction, and thank you for Marie Curie Alumni Association for inviting us. I'm really sorry that I'm not with you in Cordoba, but thank you for accommodating this possibility to intervene remotely. I will share my screen for the presentation. You will see that we are fully aligned with the two previous speakers. I would like briefly to start by recalling from where I speak. As Gian Maria recalled now, but maybe getting a bit into more details, because this will influence also my further slides, and you will explain better our key messages. So we represent universities from across Europe, and we represent quite a critical mass in research projects funded at EU level. As you can see, about 15% of all MSCA funded projects under the last framework program, and for the first years of Horizon Europe, there's a typo here, already over 20% of all funded projects under MSCA actions. So we're quite a critical voice on all these issues. And I wanted to remind the characteristics of our universities. They are all long-established universities, which means that usually they have close links with their local communities, with their territories. They're usually not established in capital cities, but usually in university cities. They are all multidisciplinary universities that put a strong emphasis on fundamental research, but we also have, this is really reflected also in our results in European funded projects, where our success results are even higher in SSH. Our universities usually have humanities and social sciences as equal and integral parts of their research portfolio. But, and this is very important for today, at the same time, our universities are established in quite different, diverse geographical, cultural, societal, and linguistic contexts. So we also reflect the European diversity in this sense. And this means that our members also have a particular awareness of all the issues that Sebastian and Jan have presented earlier. Multilingualism has always been central in our association.
Emmanuel, may
Yes.
I kindly ask you, apologies, may I kindly ask you to, how you say, launch the PowerPoint, if you can put it in presenter mode, because otherwise it's not big enough.
I mean, sorry,
Yes.
I was in
No,
presentation
now we
mode,
can
but
see
I will
you.
then,
No,
I had
it's okay.
two screens. I will, let me check again. I will unshare and share.
Otherwise, we can't read the
Yeah.
too small.
Is it better now?
No, but
No.
anyway,
So,
maybe.
So I will share again. I'm very sorry for that. I had two screens, and maybe it's better with one screen.
Yes, that's brilliant.
Is it better?
Now. Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank
So
you so much.
multilingualism has always been a central common issue of interest for all these reasons I've just mentioned. And you will see that it is reflected in our two core activities, which are cooperation activities between our members and policy and advocacy work. And it means that in the recent past, our members have organized summer schools on European multilingualism. So this is a topic we are not only talking about, but we are also fostering through transnational cooperation with really concrete activities. There were two editions organized before the pandemic with, it means with students from all across Europe, teachers across Europe, that there were summer schools that were both teaching some languages, like with courses, language discovery on, in the last edition, French, Italian, Spanish, German, Serbian, Greek, Hebrew. So it was quite diverse, but also courses on European multilingualism themselves. Another recent activity we organized for our members was in December 19, a high-level seminar for the rectors and vice-rectors of our universities, which topics was precisely universities as drivers of socio-academic integration in multilingual Europe. And I invite you to browse our website to find some takeaways from this seminar, but the hosting rector, Rector Thomas Asser from Tartu University, said native language in higher education and science are a treasure. And I think a number of key takeaways will echo what the other speakers have just presented. So one of the main conclusion was that learning a local language should be included in the terms and conditions of employment of all new faculty members and be part of the job responsibilities as an action to compensate the fact that English becomes kind of lingua franca in international higher education and research. As a second key message, that universities should develop language learning programs for foreign staff, for all scholars and lecturers to be able to read specialist literature, teach, but also do their research and participate in university administration in the local language. That scientists in all disciplines should publish their results in more than one language. Language of publishing should be chosen by researcher, but we should avoid situations where some entire scientific fields become monolingual, as was also discussed earlier, with scientific works being published only in the lingual language or only in English. And in the seminar, participants also concluded that we can notice differences in language use among fields, as was also presented earlier, that English tends to be more lingua franca in STEM sciences, while law, for instance, is a field where national languages can be found more often. So delegates also reflected during this seminar about the diversity of national regulatory context, but also diversity of institutional language policies with, for instance, in Estonia, because the seminar took place in Estonia, national regulations which allows Estonian to continue to function as a language of research because of the help of the national scheme. So there were also reflections about the role that national regulations play in promoting multilingualism in research. But it was also agreed that the use of local languages in higher education and research is one of the fundamental parameters for, and also influencing factor of language vitality, because the use of English instead of local languages tends to also restrict the domains and the development of the different national languages. So it also, in the long run, endangers the linguistic diversity of the European Union. So after this reflections about multilingualism in Coimbra Group cooperation activities, I wanted to focus on two hot topics that you've been discussing in Cordoba, and how Coimbra Group has pushed for multilingualism into recent reforms at EU level, research assessment and open science. As you recall, Gian-Maria, we were actively involved in 21 in the consultation process towards the European scoping report, and then last year in the core group that was established for drafting the agreement on research assessment reform. So already in 21, we identified in the draft scoping report versions that linguistic issues were missing, and we insisted to the Commission that they are really crucial for us. We urged the Commission to address the issue of the different possible languages for publication and the different possible languages of publication, to address the issue of the role of English as a lingua franca, and to address the issue of what counts as the language of science, especially also, as I just recalled from our last seminar, within the different national frameworks in relation to the international impact. We were quite satisfied with the final text of the reform agreement, as it reflects our advocacy in this regard, and in particular reflected through the core commitments 1 and 6. As you know, the core commitment 1 recognized the diversity of contributions and careers in research in accordance with the needs and nature of research, and it explicitly mentions that the diversity should also include diverse outputs, irrespective of the language in which they are communicated. So we were quite satisfied with this explicit mention. And similarly for the core commitment 6, on the review and development of research assessment criteria, tools and processes, the fact that this commitment should also include diverse outputs in different languages, and that this is mentioned explicitly. Then, in the course of last year, Council also adopted conclusions on open science and research assessments, and here we welcome that the member states acknowledged that action still has to be taken, in particular to encourage the use of multilingualism for the purpose, as discussed earlier, of wider communication of European research results. However, so we also welcomed that the Council conclusions acknowledged the important role of multilingualism very explicitly, and that they included a specific chapter 3 in their conclusions on the development of multilingualism for European scholarly publications. However, the conclusions welcome what is in italic here, that promising developments have recently emerged in the area of automatic translation. And the conclusions also consider that automatic translation may have major potential. And here we had expressed to the Council prior to the adoption of their conclusions, and we will continue addressing this issue. We consider that this would be better done by continuing and guaranteeing the opportunity for teaching and research in the linguistic fields and exchanges between European universities rather than the semi-automated translation. So these are two important policy fields where we have recently expressed our positions in multilingualism, and as you can see I think very much aligned with what Eurodoc or what the Finnish Learning Society have presented earlier. So thank you very much for this.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Let me open straight, since time is running out, let me open straight the floor to Q&A. There are quite a few. That's nice. That's very nice. Do you have a mic? I'll go around if you like. Yes.
Thank you very much for this session. I'm a translation studies scholar and a professional translator, so I really appreciated the fact that multilingualism was addressed in this conference. I also teach academic writing in English, and I'm fully bilingual in French and English, and I see how difficult it is for people who are not Anglophones in the social sciences and humanities, my background, to write papers in English, because it's not just a question of translating, it's a whole different worldview. It's a different way of interpreting the world, and a lot of hidden assumptions behind academic writing in English, which you have to make explicit to students so that they can understand how they will be evaluated and judged. So I think really in this world, especially in the humanities and social sciences, people who are not Anglophones, who are not fully bilingual as I am, who have lived in both cultures, are at a big disadvantage. And they need, training is very important. I have organized an academic writing in English workshop for the Swiss chapter, and I think it should be done at the level of the Marie Curie community. And the other thing too is I think there should be some kind of project with the Marie Curie on communication between cultures, on the hidden assumptions in communication. That, because we have such a wealth of, with all the people from all the different countries. So I think it should, those two projects, one academic writing in English on a general scale, taking into consideration the different languages, and a project on multicultural communication.
Thank you very much. If you could introduce yourself, just to know
everyone.
I mean,
yeah,
just to know.
Jane Wilhelm, and I'm from the Swiss chapter.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Who was the next one with the, over there? The row below, before the last one? Yep.
Okay, so my name is Kitty Baracci, and yeah, like I have a couple of questions, so I have notes. First of all, I wanted to say that I'm really happy as well that we are talking about this topic. I have a background in communication studies, and I speak 6 languages, like 5 of them fluently. But I have some doubts regarding some things. Like one of the things is that regarding writing publications, and based on my case, I speak 5 languages fluently, but not excellently. I mean, it never will get to the point of being completely like native level. And I think that how could we address this, no? Like how can we change our expectations? I don't speak anymore Hungarian enough well, or I don't write enough well anymore in Hungarian too. So I have no language to say that is like so high level, and we are many people like this in this world. We just don't talk about it, because it's some kind of somehow the result of the European project, no? Like the European Union and its mobility. So I think it's one question that I wanted to ask. How can we lower those kind of standards of publishing and writing? Or not lower, but changing. And also, I just have a question that, do you have data on those who, like I saw that in Hungary the percentage is very high of those who don't speak foreign language, but do you have data on those who speak foreign language? How many languages do they speak? I think it's very interesting to see. And not only for Hungary, but for the others as well. And my question is, can we think of diverse outputs in science communication that are not lingual outputs? And what would be the way? I would really love to see training on memes, how to use memes in science communication, for example. I'm just throwing there some things. And the last question is about the MCAA, I am very enthusiastic about the question that how can we change this space, and how can we show the way forward in this space of MCAA to be more multilingual? What are your thoughts about it?
Okay, let me just do a point of order.
Sorry.
Since all your questions will take another hour probably,
Maybe
because they are
pick
all
one. I'm
really to the
sorry.
point, but I leave the speakers, whoever of them wishes to pick one of the and answer. Then just and then move to, since there were there's another session right after this, and then there are questions also as well. Other people that will raise their hand.
Maybe I take a very quick shot at the question on research assessment. So 2 points that I would make there. Number one, you're speaking about excellence. I think that's anyway a critical point. We cannot excel, all of us, in all points, so we need both the excellent science and the solid, good science. That's one thing. The second thing is then that you say you maybe not as excellent to understand all the nuances well. That's a point also, of course, of us. How do we write? How do we communicate outwards to make our content, our outputs understandable? Also, not to just the most highly skilled, most highly proficient researchers, highly skilled in the field and the language, but to make it understandable. So that's also a part of training for the researchers to communicate properly, right?
So, you wanted to say something?
Yes, is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
First of all, I very much like the question or the comment about the language bias for non-natives English speakers, because the research assessment reform requires even more extensive use of narratives. It expects that researchers are explaining their projects, their merits in narrative style, and this is certainly a disadvantage to non-native speakers. So it would be great to find solutions to alleviate this. And your proposal was just excellent, that the community could take a step to help. There was a question about the non-lingual outputs.
Maybe we can take it personally.
The question of the day.
Right. No, may I, just because there is another session knocking at the door. I don't want to be rude to them. That's just, I'm polite with that. There's a question from Monica Detail, the Executive Director. I comment, and then I have a question for Emmanuel to conclude the
First of all,
session.
I think this session is really very important. I regret this is not a full session where everybody would be there. Because I think these different presentations would merit to be listened by every Marie Curie or every participant to this event. So next year, maybe you should have it on the, I would support you. So the second point is there are many things done about multilingualism. I have been checking because I knew that COST, for example, has been funding several networks over the 10, 15 last years on these issues. And it would be interesting to look what the outcomes were. Some are still running, some are closed in several years, but I presume the results are still valid. So that was a comment I wanted to say. And the third comment is that under the French presidency, there was a huge event, 3 days long, not 3 years, 3 days, from the Cultural Ministry. And I think also, I was trying to check, but it's too slow, if it is still available online, because there were huge and really very rich contributions with merits to be listened to. And I wanted to share this information, and I would have lots of comments, but no time for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Monica. I have a question for Emmanuel, so we conclude the session, and then a comment about the very comment from you. This is the reason why. This is what you said, start to coordinate it on this. It's one of the reasons why. Anyone interested, please drop me a line and see how we can work together on this. But Emmanuel, to conclude, we really have a few seconds, but you have a vantage point on this discussion as Coimbra Group. Sorry, can you hear me? Yes. And so I was about to say something that doesn't really make sense, but in a few words, what could be the next steps in things that, something like the MCAA, an association like ours, what can we do to at least make more evident the multilingualism is an issue that needs discussion? What can you suggest us?
I would just follow what Monica from Initiative for Science Europe just recommended. I would just suggest to make it higher on the agendas of next annual conferences or high-level events, not as a parallel thematic session just followed by people who are interested in the topic. I would put it higher on the agenda of associations like MCAA, but also of policymakers. And I think that because we are also associated to a number of European universities alliances, and most of our members are involved in the alliances. I did not mention that, but you are probably aware that this is also a topic that is more and more central to the implementation and further rollout of the alliances. Just to mention one, Circle U, an alliance where we are also associated, they have launched what they call a think and do on multilingualism, and they are preparing recommendations for policymakers on that. So for me, it's put it higher on the agenda. Thank you.
That's so comforting, that's reassuring, but I'll thank you very much. Someone knows the story behind this session.
Can I just add one comment? I think it was on the slides from Sebastian, the question of the costs. And I'm always saying to the Commission, because some years ago, each legal document, the European Commission was obliged to translate it in all languages. And they decided something like 12 or 15 years ago, it was too expensive, and they only translate in the 3 official, German, English, still English, and French. In fact, I think as a citizen, I'm saying since then, I wish money to be spent in translation. First, the profession of translation is very important. It is different than machines. Secondly, it's really so important that we protect our diversity, our differences, because this is a richness for Europe, which in research is just indispensable. So I wanted just to finish on that.
Thank you so much.
Tell the Commission people, the member states, that we have to pay for it. We want our taxpayers' monies to go.
Which means that in the next future we can invite the DGT, the DG translation.
Yes.
That's it.
And I would be very happy.
That was in the original plan. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much to all the speakers. We are 8 minutes late on schedule, but 8 minutes I think it's acceptable. Come on. So thank you so much. Bye. Yeah. Oh, it's easy. It's gianmaria.greco@marie